If you ever feel out of control around food, you're not alone, and you're in the right place to learn practical, no-nonsense information about why you binge and how to stop. Binge eating does not mean that something is wrong with you. It's a natural but primitive brain response that you can correct. If you're ready for change, sign up for the Brain Over Binge self-paced online course for less than $20 per month. And if you feel you need personalized support, we also offer one-on-one coaching and group coaching. To learn more, go to brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. And I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to the Brain Over Binge podcast, where you learn a simple, brain-based approach to ending binge eating. I'm Kathryn Hansen, and I'm the author of 2 books on binge eating recovery, Brain Over Binge and the Brain Over Binge Recovery Guide. My goal is to help you stop binge eating in the most efficient way possible, while also recognizing the uniqueness of each person's journey. Today I have a guest on the show to talk about a topic that I've never deeply explored on the podcast, and that's sleep. Sleep is fundamental to our existence and our physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's connected to all parts of our lives. And so it only makes sense that it's also connected to our relationship with food and to recovery from binge eating. And we'll discuss that in this episode. My guest is Devin Burke, and he's the author of the book, The Sleep Advantage: Optimizing Your Night to Win Your Day. He's also a TEDx speaker, a renowned sleep coach, and the founder of the Sleep Science Academy. He takes a simple and science-based approach to sleep while also considering each person's unique needs. So please take only what ideas resonate with you in your own recovery. I do want to point out here that we talked a little bit about the timing of eating to optimize sleep. And I wanted to include these parts of the conversation for people that it will apply to and who will benefit from it. But know that your eating schedule is up to you. And if any sort of eating plan feels restrictive in any way, then it's not something to utilize right now as you're learning to eat enough and give up binging. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share our conversation about the connections between sleep and binge eating recovery. Welcome to the show, Devin.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, and I'm really happy to bring you on the show because I work with binge eaters and people who have a disordered relationship with food. And this abnormal relationship with food can really affect sleep. And in turn, poor sleep can affect people's relationship with food. So I just really think you'll have a lot of helpful ideas to share. To get started, can you just go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background as far as helping people with sleep?
Yeah. So how I got into sleep is actually not out of my own sleep issue. A lot of times people ask you must have had terrible sleep issues to help people sleep. It was actually out of someone else's pain. So about 5 years ago, I was working with a lot of high performing entrepreneurs, business owners, people who have a lot of stress, anxiety, and someone reached out for support about their sleep. And so I looked into what was available, and what I found was sleeping pills. And so I went down the rabbit hole of looking, what do sleeping pills do on the body? Is that a real solution? And I was shocked by what I found. And then as I continued to do research, I found this was a massive problem for so many people. And that really piqued my curiosity and interest, and then just led me into studying sleep. And I was able to help this person. I said, well, if I can help one person, then I can help, thousands or even maybe millions of people. Not help millions yet, but thousands. And that's really what set me on the path of really studying sleep, understanding the psychological triggers, the physiological triggers of what sleep is, why it happens, why people can't sleep, and how to improve it.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that. And I'm sure there are millions of people who struggle with this. Eating disorders affect about 30 million people in the US, and I assume sleeping problems affect more than that. Is that true?
That is true. I mean, depending on what type of disorder we're talking about, the problem that we solve for people is insomnia. And it's estimated about 40 million people suffer from insomnia. That's, I think, a underestimate. I just saw recently a statistic that said 1 in every 3 adults has some type of insomnia.
Wow.
So, and insomnia is either trouble falling asleep or staying asleep, or you can have both. So there's different classifications of insomnia depending on, what your challenge is. But it's a massive, massive, massive problem for so many people, especially the last couple of years. That definitely has, with the increase of stress and anxiety and what's going on in the world, there's been a big uptick in people having sleeping issues.
Yeah, for sure. And I know there is a lot of crossover between the sleeping issues and the food issues, like I kind of talked about in the intro. And it makes sense on an intuitive level. Like if you're not eating well, you're it's probably going to affect sleep. And if you're not sleeping well, it may affect your eating. So there is that sort of bi-directional relationship. And I looked into it a bit. I'm definitely not an expert on sleep, but I did confirm that there is research showing a significant overlap between sleeping problems and eating disorders. Like, not everyone with poor sleep has an eating disorder, and not everyone with an eating disorder has poor sleep, but there's definitely a connection there, or an association between them in the research. Do you have any insight surrounding this?
Yeah, I mean, we see it absolutely. I mean, well, from a physiological standpoint, when we're not getting the sleep we need, our hormones get thrown off, specifically ghrelin and leptin. So the hunger signaling hormone and the leptin, the full signaling hormone, those get out of whack. So most people crave sugar and fat when you're underslept. So people are eating more and their body's not telling them that they're full, they're hungrier. And they're also eating the wrong types of foods because of this hormone dysregulation that takes place because they're not sleeping. So there's, on a physiological level, and I'm sure people listening to this, even I, after a night of not sleeping well, you're hungrier and you crave sort of the wrong types of foods. So there's that, absolutely a physiological connection there. And then there's also a psychological one as well. Meaning when you're underslept, your willpower, the prefrontal cortex is really important. That gets affected during certain stages of sleep, gets refreshed is an easy way of explaining it. And when we're not getting enough sleep, our willpower gets decreased. So, even if we want to make healthier choices, that willpower and that decision-making ability gets weakened, which then often leads to poor choices and poor dietary choices.
Yeah. So much of what you said is really applicable to people struggling with food issues. And I would love to break some of those things down more with you. Actually, I have 3 things I kind of want to hit on. And then I also want to talk about willpower. But the 3 things I would like to discuss with you is nutrition, weight, and stress. And these are 3 things that come up a lot in people with eating disorders. And also, I assume, with people with sleeping problems. And again, that intersection between the two. So if we could dive into nutrition more, that would be great. So you talked about some of the cravings that may come up. And I totally relate to that. I mean, even now, 17 years removed from my eating disorder, if I don't sleep well, which is pretty common, I have 4 kids and I don't sleep that well, like I get more cravings, I get hungrier, I have cravings for more of the unhealthier food. So I'm really glad you brought that up. So I guess, could you dive into a little more how nutrition affects sleeping patterns?
Yeah. I mean, you can't really separate sleep from your life. And I find a lot of people in their minds tend to do that. And so what's good for your health is going to be good for your sleep, and what's good for your sleep is going to be good for your health. So, what you're eating, it makes a huge difference. And when you're eating it also makes almost just the same difference when we're talking about improving or diminishing your sleep quality. So what you eat, I mean, there's so many, theories out there as far as, what should I be eating? Obviously the things that hurt sleep are some of the most common things that people consume, which is alcohol and caffeine, and then sugar. All of the things that most people have a hard time with managing are things that greatly impact sleep. And it's sort of this cycle that happens of when you're, drinking caffeine, which reduces sleep pressure because it blocks adenosine, which is what builds up in our mind and body to create that sleepiness. Then we don't get into the deeper stages of sleep. Just like with alcohol, when we're drinking alcohol, it disturbs the deeper cycle of REM sleep. And so it then becomes a cyclical process of you're trying to kind of re-energize yourself with sugar and caffeine, and then wind yourself down with wine or with, alcohol. And so it's like the uppers and the downers. And that can kind of continue that cycle when you're not getting enough sleep. So, what you eat, super important. I like to keep things simple for people. It's really sometimes challenging, I think, to understand, well, what is the best way of eating? And I think that's really, you need to experiment. But when you eat is also really important, because oftentimes people eat way too close to bedtime. And that also disturbs our ability to get into these deeper stages of sleep. So you need at least a 3 to sometimes even a 4-hour window between food you're eating and going to sleep, or else your body won't get into these deeper stages of sleep. So what you eat is important, and when you eat it is also important.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I listened to this from the perspective of someone who struggled with binging, and sometimes hearing this advice, which is all very helpful, and I appreciate that you try to keep it simple for people. I remember feeling like I can't even follow this advice because I don't feel like I can fundamentally control my food choices. So that's a hard thing, I think, for people who are struggling with this. I mean, if people feel like, okay, I don't want to do a 3 hour window before bedtime because then I get too hungry and then I might have urges to binge, what are some like very simple nutrition things people can incorporate that don't feel restrictive?
Yeah, what comes down to, to what you're looking to achieve. So there's real hard science that shows if you eat too close to bedtime, you don't get into these deeper stages of sleep. So, and that could be challenging for certain people depending on their lifestyle and, what their day looks like. Anything you do consistently makes a difference. So even if you consistently, a couple nights of the week are eating earlier and you're kind of developing that habit, flexing that habit to eat earlier, that would be a positive step in the right direction. And it's never about perfection. It's just about progress, right? So every day, all these little choices eventually add up. So I always tell people, listen, just experiment with it. Experiment with a couple of days eating a little bit earlier and not making it wrong when you do have popcorn at night or whatever it is. Like, that's the other thing, not placing judgment on or thinking that you're failing when you maybe eat a little bit later. There's nights where I eat a little bit later. So it's just around understanding that what you do consistently is really what makes the difference, and making sure that you're getting enough food throughout the day is really important. If people are really busy and they're not eating enough, then they tend to eat more towards the end of the day. And if you can, make sure that you're prioritizing your meal times, it'll make it a lot easier than to stay consistent with a healthy schedule for eating. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I like that you point out that you don't have to make yourself a failure if you do eat something at night, of course. And I think it can sometimes simplify it for people if they just kind of take eating off the table at night. I mean, everyone's different. People have to do what works for them, but people who are recovering from binge eating, that's a lot of times when they'll have the strongest urges to binge is at night. So if you kind of know, I'm not going to eat anything. I'm going to allow my brain to, I teach a lot of brain-based concepts. I'm going to allow my brain to do what it's doing with a level of acceptance, but I'm not going to follow that action of eating anything. I mean, of course, you're not failing if you do eat something, but once people do take kind of that first bite and that second bite, a lot of times that's when it spirals out of control. So maybe not even going to the kitchen at night to begin with can be a really helpful strategy for a lot of people.
Yeah, and filling that time with things that are, rather than feeling like you're failing if you go into the kitchen, having a plan for what are you going to do that supports the decisions that you want to make.
Mm-hmm.
And we call that like a sleep ritual or routine. And so that could look like, stretching or meditating or reading or playing with your kids or petting an animal or, painting or doing puzzles or like something that would be positive, that would allow your body to get back into the parasympathetic nervous system so that sleep can happen and so that you're not so focused on food. Drinking water can be a good strategy too. I mean, obviously that can be a little bit of a challenge for people. If you're drinking a bunch of water at night, then you're going to obviously probably have to get up and use the restroom in the middle of the night, which isn't really what we want. But eating, fiber-rich foods too, foods that'll make you feel more full for dinner would also, I think, be a good thing for people to think about if they have issues with night eating.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you pointing out that it's important to make sure you're getting enough during the day so you can really come to that time at night and know that you had enough food, you nourished your body, you ate all you needed for that day, and you get to go to sleep, get replenished, and wake up the next day and nourish your body again. So I'd like to move on to the next topic, which is weight. And a lot of people that struggle with binging also have weight struggles as well. And the solution a lot of people turn to is, oh, I just need to diet and eat less and sort of starve myself to lose the weight. I really teach that is not helpful. That's completely counterproductive as far as ending binge eating. But weight is actually connected to sleep in a lot of ways. And focusing on improving sleep can actually have beneficial effects on your weight. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, well, it really goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of this conversation, which is how when you're not getting the sleep you need, you're hungrier and you crave all the wrong foods and your body doesn't know when you're full. So that's the one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it that we didn't talk about was that your body actually burns fat during the night. Your body it's an amazing thing, the body. And when you're getting into these deeper stages of sleep, it's actually your body is, removing toxins. There's a lot going on during the night. Like it might seem like you're asleep, but your body's wide awake and it's burning fat and it's releasing testosterone and growth hormone and it's cleaning up cellular damage. There's so much that happens throughout the night. So when you get more sleep, you're allowing that process to take place. And then there's the connection between stress and specifically the hormone cortisol. So when you're getting more sleep, your cortisol levels are going to be, which is a stress hormone, which also can, store fat. When your body is in a state of relaxation, it operates at a higher level of efficiency. So when you're getting better sleep, your body is more efficient. Your metabolism is heightened, or at least it's where it should be. And your body is not in a state of stress, so it's not storing the fat that you eat. So it's very, very interconnected. Again, there's the psychological portion of that, and then there's the real physiological aspect of it. But the stress is a big one, because if your body is stressed and you're not sleeping, it's just going to add more stress to the body. And then a stressed body doesn't rest. So it's, stress and sleep are bidirectionally linked as well.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I try to teach people who tend to be very overly focused on food, and that's of course the case with people with eating disorders, that there are so many other factors to health and so many other factors that go into weight. And I think sleep and stress are huge factors that you can focus on. And that's a much healthier place to focus as someone who's trying to overcome food obsessions, instead of focusing on, okay, I have to eat all the perfect right things. Instead, focus on how can I reduce stress? How can I improve my sleep? And that's all going to help my body become sort of what it naturally is, its healthy version of itself. And it's just a much healthier place to focus.
100%.
Yeah. And I'd like to talk about stress too. That was kind of the third topic I wanted to talk about, as far as the link between eating disorders and sleep. And eating disorders really create a lot of stress. I mean, you think about the stress of being malnourished. If you're really dieting and restricting, and if you're binge eating, you're really overloading your body with a lot of food that's just creating a lot of stress in your body, not to mention the mental stress of having the eating disorder. So can you talk a little more about the connection between dealing with issues like that and then how that affects your sleep and sort of compounds on itself?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all in relationship to everything, right? So we have a relationship with sleep. We have a relationship with our body. We have a relationship with food. And that's really where I think it's so important for people to understand is you're in relationship to everything. When something is out of balance, whether it's with food or whether it's with sleep or whether it's in a relationship, everything is interconnected. So really understanding and thinking about, well, what is my relationship to my body? What is my relationship to sleep? What is my relationship to food? And really looking at that as the root cause of then your actions. Because the way I see it is sleep is a result. How are you relating to the things that are creating challenges for you? And when you start to understand those underlying relationships and unpack that, you can start to see the thread. And oftentimes the thread is stress. It's stress being created in how you're thinking. It's stress in what you believe about yourself or about food or about sleep. And, it's really having the tools and the understanding to separate yourself from those stressful thoughts and having the tools to understand that you can reframe them and also take responsibility. And not in a way that's like, it's your fault, but in a way where you can respond in a different way to these relationships, whether it's to food, whether it's to stress, whether it's to your relationship, whether it's to sleep. And that's really what I think when people understand that, it allows a little bit of a separation from the actual thing that they perceive as being the problem. And that's really what we do when we work with people with sleep. So I'm curious, is that sort of how you see things, Kathryn, when you're working with people with their food?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I teach people a lot about the higher brain and the lower brain. The higher brain, which you touched on, the prefrontal cortex, where your self-control comes from, and then the lower brain, which is in charge of those primal instincts, those habitual drives to, seek pleasure and avoid pain and really drive you toward acting on these harmful habits surrounding food. So I teach people to reconnect with the power of their higher brain to overcome these harmful drives. And it seems like sleep is interesting. I'd be curious to hear your take on this, but it's a very natural thing. It seems like it's a more lower brain driven primal instinct that we all have That's a healthy instinct, but maybe we overthink it. Like maybe we use our higher brain to develop a poor relationship with it when it just kind of needs to happen naturally.
That's it. That is exactly it. That is the secret to improving sleep. It's just, I always say, just like breathing or just like your heart beating, you don't have to think about those things. You don't have to think about sleep. It's when you start to obsess over sleep or what it's going to do to your weight or what it's going to do to your relationship to food or how you're eating. That's when it can become a challenge. And sleep's never the problem. It's just the result. It's just a result. And so when people understand that and you can stop obsessing about sleep or stop obsessing about, whatever you're obsessing about or hyper focused on, it actually then creates the space for your body's intelligence to come online. And the body knows how to sleep, just like the body knows what to eat. Yeah. I think that, you look in nature, animals aren't on diets. They know what to eat. They know how much to eat. So it's like the more you can connect back to that innate intelligence and get out of the way of your body knows what to do. It's just our thoughts and beliefs and conditioning is what gets in the way. And so when you can understand that conditioning at a deeper level, then you can just get out of the way and just allow your body to do what it knows how to do, whether that's eat a certain food, eat a certain amount of food, whether that's sleep. I mean, it's really all the same from the vantage point that I see it.
Yeah, I really love that. I love that you brought up that eating is a very natural thing too. And what gets out of whack and people who end up with binge eating problems is that you do start to diet, you start to overthink it, you start to think, okay, I can never eat this, I have to lose this amount of weight. And then the instincts get all skewed and you end up with these massive cravings and binge eating can result. So it's sort of about letting go and allowing your body to do what it naturally knows how to do. And that can be difficult. And, you help people with the sleeping side of it. I help people with the eating side of it, but there's definitely some interconnections there. And I want to mention too, we talked earlier about these ways you can help yourself with nutrition and reducing stress and different ways that sleep is necessary, but we can use that and sort of overthink it and think, oh my gosh, I'm failing because I'm not getting enough sleep. It's going to make my eating disorder worse. And I just want to encourage everyone that, based on what Devin just said, there's no need to stress yourself out about it.
Absolutely not. And if you're stressing out about your sleep because of how it's going to affect your weight, then you need to look at how you're thinking about it and how you're relating to it, because anything that's going to create more stress, a stressful thought or stressful belief, there's a high chance that it's just not true. And that how you're looking at it, it's the very thing that's going to keep you from getting what you want. And so the key word, I think you said a couple key words that we really instill and when we work with people is letting go and learning to accept things. And acceptance is not a strategy and it's not resignation. It's just becoming present to the facts of what actually is, whether it's what you want or not. And the more you can just become present to the facts and understand the stories and the thoughts and beliefs that you tell yourself that then, create certain feelings in your mind and body system, the more resourceful you're going to be. And when you have that resourcefulness, then you're able to then make the decisions that are most conducive to getting out of the way of your body. Because again, the body knows how to sleep. The body knows how much to eat. The body knows what to eat. It's just, we need to tap back into that intelligence. And that happens when you understand that you're not your thoughts. We have thoughts, but we're not our thoughts, right? Yeah. Thoughts come in and they go. And oftentimes the thoughts that are there are not useful. They don't help us sleep. They create stories around sleep that aren't true, that then are the very things that keep us from sleeping. Yeah. So it's really important to examine your thoughts. And, at Sleep Science Academy, we do this whole inventory of, what are your negative sleep thoughts? What's your sleep story? What's your relationship with sleep? And then we unpack that and help people really see, well, can you see how thinking that way actually creates more stress, which then keeps you up? Mm-hmm. And as soon as you see something, you can't unsee it. And now you have a choice. You have a choice to continue to believe things that might not be true or see it in a different way that then allows you to get out of the way of your body. And then your body does what it knows how to do.
Yeah, all that's really great. I'd like to move on to talking about willpower. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, but it's one of those things where you don't want to tell yourself, I have to go to sleep because then I won't have any willpower. You don't want to say that, but there is that connection between better sleep and stronger willpower or stronger ability to access self-control, which is really important when overcoming addictions and habits and things like that. So can you speak a little more to the connection between willpower and sleep?
Yeah, I mean, well, so here again, is willpower connected to sleep? 100%. Now, if you're thinking in your head, oh my God, if I don't sleep, I'm not going to have the willpower to make good choices. I'm not going to eat the right things because Devin told me and I listened to this podcast, right? That's not useful. That's not helpful. So yes, 100%, our ability to make decisions, the amount of energy we have to make those decisions, all connected to sleep. But how you think about it is really, really important. So it's one thing to know, yes, when you improve your sleep, you will have more energy and you will have more mental capacity and willpower. But thinking about it in a way that, oh my God, if I get sleep, I'm not going to have it, that's dangerous. And it'll actually keep you from sleep. So please, if you find yourself thinking that, just check yourself and know that that's not really a useful way of relating to this.
Yeah. And something I thought of too is like knowing the connection helps you become more aware. Like when you don't sleep, you'll know that it's going to be a little more challenging the next day. You'll know that you might have some more cravings. You know that your appetite might be a little dysregulated, but you also know that you can still access your willpower. It's just that it's going to be a little more challenging. Would you agree?
Yeah. And just to be gentle for yourself, knowing that that is the case. Yeah. So that's another whole thing. Like, I think a lot of times people beat themselves up, and that's a cycle that keeps people stuck. It's not about perfection. It's just about progress. And so having that foresight that, yes, the next day might be more challenging if you're not getting enough sleep, and then just being a little bit more gentle on yourself will then create the space for you to make better decisions or do things that maybe will allow you to feel more rested outside of actual sleep, which is definitely a distinction between rest and sleep.
Yeah, for sure. Something a lot of people who listen to my podcast may know is that I had my first child pretty soon after I recovered, and I just stopped sleeping for the next, I don't know, many, many years because I've had 4 kids in pretty quick succession. I don't say stop sleeping altogether, but did not sleep very much at all. They were all terrible sleepers. And I never went back to my eating disorder. So it's not like, oh, if you don't sleep, you're going to have this terrible relationship with food. And you just have to know that it can create some cravings. It can create some challenges like we've been talking about, but it's definitely still possible to overcome things even when you don't get enough sleep, because sometimes life doesn't afford that opportunity. Some of us have many different stressors. It's not just kids, it's all these responsibilities. And sometimes we just can't. And I think giving ourselves grace for that and being gentle with ourselves, as you said, is really important.
That puts you in the best mindset to then make the decisions, to then reduce the stress, to then get the sleep, to then increase the willpower and the motivation and the energy, right? So it's all cyclical, it's all related. But yeah, it's really important. But whenever you're, finding yourself in resistance to, something that you're doing, should be a red flag to look at, how am I thinking about this? And whether that's in regards to sleep, whether that's in regards to your relationship to food, but it's really, our bodies are always trying to tell us things, and it's up to us to listen. And sometimes, when we're so busy and we're tired and we're stressed, there's a lot of noise and it can be hard to listen, but that's just, you can make that mean hey, that's just a sign that it's time to create a little bit more boundaries in your life, or ask for help. That's the other thing. If you find yourself in a really, difficult situation, get help, right? There's so many people I feel like that try to do, overcome things, whether it's a sleep challenge or a weight challenge or relationship to food challenge, and they're just trying to do it by themselves. It's so much easier just to raise your hand and just say, hey, I need help. And that's not wrong. That's called being human, and, so being gentle on yourself, and then if and when you need support, ask for it, because there are people that are willing and able to support you, whether it's with your food or with your sleep or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think reminding people to ask for help is really important, because just because, like I said, okay, I didn't sleep and I never relapsed, that was one example, but I also did things to try to help myself during these challenging time. And I think if you're going through a challenge, if you're in a really high state of stress where sleep seems to be a low priority, there are ways you can carve out more opportunities for sleep. And that will make it easier on yourself if you are able to get support and help yourself sleep better so that you do have more access to that willpower. Just because you can overcome challenges doesn't mean you shouldn't help support yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. We all need support. And depending on where you are with, your challenge, you might need more or less. And so I think it's really important that people really just connect to the understanding that asking for support is not weakness. It's actually, it's a strength. And right now in society, I think a lot of people feel like they have to figure it out on their own. And that just keeps the problem going. And you don't have to, but that's a choice, right? And everyone gets to make that choice. And sometimes we need support, and then we get the support we need, and then you don't need it. That's the goal. But then there's always, at least for me, I'm a big believer that, there's always something to work on and work through. And as we overcome challenges in one area, oftentimes other challenges are created in other areas. So a quicker way to shortcut those challenges is just to find somebody that can help you do it.
Yeah. This has all been really helpful. I'd love to end with just some quick questions for you about sort of that traditional sleep advice. I think this would kind of be a fun way to end the show. Electronics before bed. What's your opinion?
Not really the best. No, really, it's more so the hyperarousal that's created from the electronics. So whether you're watching a great, Netflix show, or whether you're answering emails or texting or whatever it is, it's the hyperarousal that comes along with that activity. Like your body might feel like it's relaxed, but your brain is trying to figure things out and problem solve. And that's just not conducive to a great night's sleep. And then of course there's the blue light that comes from these devices. And there's science that shows that turns off the melatonin faucet or doesn't allow that faucet to turn all the way on. And melatonin is sleep hormone. That's the hormone that signals it's time to go to sleep. So, there's really two aspects. But again, it's not like every night you can't be on your device, or, you can't watch movies late at night, or you have to be like so obsessive about it. But what you do consistently makes a difference. The less you're on your devices at night, the healthier your circadian rhythm is going to be, and also the healthier your sleep quality is going to be.
For sure. And if you're someone who is struggling with eating problems and wants to increase your willpower, that's just a simple thing you can do. And then you're also away from that toxic element of social media and stuff at night that feeds into all the thoughts that prevent you from sleeping. So yeah, I think that's a simple thing. My next question, which you mentioned, melatonin. What do you think about melatonin supplements?
I'm not a big fan of melatonin supplements.
Okay.
And the reason is because, well, first and foremost, there was a meta-analysis that looked at melatonin supplements and, sleep. And a meta-analysis is looking at many, many studies. And it showed that it really didn't help improve onset or quality of sleep. Very, very little. So that's, from this meta-analysis, but also it's a hormone. So you got to be careful when you're playing with hormones. You used to need a script in the European Union to get melatonin, but here in the United States, it's like in everything, even like kids gummies and stuff, sleep gummies and supplements. So melatonin as an antioxidant, using melatonin as an antioxidant, different story. I think it's an amazing antioxidant. It can have health promoting benefits, but using melatonin for sleep, or believing that you need anything in order to sleep, is actually a false belief, because you don't. So that's my thoughts on melatonin.
That's a great point. Because people have slept for, throughout history without supplements and different tricks and tips and things like that. So that's great to not become reliant on any one thing for sleep.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is there's people all over the world that are doing all the wrong things and they're able to sleep. Mm-hmm. So, and our body naturally produces melatonin. So I would say if you're having issues with sleep, do things that support your natural melatonin production, which would be getting more sunlight during the day. Seeing the sun rise, watching the sun set, amber light, sitting around a fire is very healthy for sort of helping that melatonin faucet, that orange glow. Turning off half the lights in your home actually can increase, the melatonin timing to be released. So doing things that'll support the natural melatonin production, as well as, cleaning up your gut health. If making sure that you have a healthy gut microbiome, that's linked to, melatonin production as well. So address the root cause. Don't just throw a supplement on it and think that it's going to solve it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I remember back when I was struggling, I did hear something about how sleep makes you have less willpower and therefore, your eating disorder might get worse. I remember hearing that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to sleep. So I went and bought melatonin and it gave me these crazy dreams of giant spiders. So I stopped.
Oh my gosh. I've heard of that. I've heard of people have some interesting dreams on melatonin.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the most prevalent sleep supplement out there. most people, when they hear sleep supplement, the first thing they think about is melatonin. And I mean, obviously this is just my opinion, so there's other sleep experts that say, yeah, melatonin, yeah, you can use it in small amounts.
My last question about that sort of traditional sleep hygiene advice is, what about exercise? Because exercise, that sort of ties into a lot of what people with eating disorders struggle with. And exercising up until a certain point before bed, I know can affect sleep. So kind of when do you recommend cutting off any exercise that people do at night?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you definitely don't want to exercise too close to bedtime because it's going to raise your body temperature, and your body temperature needs to drop 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit for sleep to happen. So exercising in the morning or in the early afternoon would be your ideal time, but it also depends on the type of exercise. So if you're weight training, or if you're running, if you're doing, more of a anaerobic versus aerobic type of exercise, that'll make a difference. But ultimately, it's ideal not to exercise right before bed because it's going to affect your body temperature, and then that's going to affect your sleep. So that's in a nutshell. I would say if you can prioritize exercise in the front of your day, whether that's in the morning or the early afternoon, and try to leave at least a few hours or more between your exercise session and sleep.
Yeah, it's just giving your body the best chance to allow it to go into those deeper stages of sleep and to get a restful night's sleep and wake up and feel more ready to face the day. And one thing you mentioned in your bio was that you help people get and stay asleep so they can wake up with more peace, power, and presence. And I think all of that is just so helpful to someone struggling to overcome an eating disorder or another addiction or habit. So I really appreciate you being here. And do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
Thank you, first and foremost, for having me. I would just say, if you're having an issue with sleep, the fastest way to resolve it is actually to stop trying to fix it. Mm-hmm. As crazy as that sounds, people get stuck in this. They're trying to force or control something that they can't force or control. And if you're listening to this and right now you're trying to force and control any aspect of your sleep, know that that's the very thing that will keep sleep from happening. And just let it go.
That's great. That's a great point to end on. And I really appreciate you being here and all the insights and information you shared. And yeah, it was great talking to you.
Thanks, Kathryn. Thanks for the work you're doing in the world.
I hope you learned a lot from Devin's insights and practical tips, and that you'll be able to make the changes that make sense to you to help you improve your sleep and your relationship with food. If you want to learn more about Devin and get support in the area of sleep, you can go to sleepscienceacademy.com, and there's a link to that site in the show description. For support with your relationship with food and ending binge eating, you can get my online course, or you can sign up for group coaching or one-on-one coaching. You can learn about those options and decide what's right for you at brainoverbinge.com/subscribe. I appreciate you being here today, and I wish you much peaceful sleep. And as always, I want to encourage you and remind you that you have the power to change your brain and live a binge-free life. The Brain Over Binge podcast is produced and recorded by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC. All work is copyrighted by Brain Over Binge Recovery Coaching, LLC, and all rights are reserved. As a disclaimer, the hosts of the Brain Over Binge podcast are not professional counselors or licensed healthcare providers, and this podcast is not a substitute for medical advice or any form of professional therapy. Eating disorders can have serious health consequences, and you are strongly advised to seek medical attention for matters relating to your health. Please get help when you need it, and good luck on your journey. Need more help? You can find all of our current and upcoming options for support at brainoverbinge.com.